Hello. Oh,
Hey, how you doing? Sorry
you
about
didn't
that.
realize that music was going to end, did you?
No, I didn't know how long it was going to be.
Yeah, we are live. So,
Awesome.
anyone joining us, please let us know where you're coming in from. We're happy to have you. I'm stoked to have Mark. He's one of my morning coffee friends. I get to talk to him on a pretty regular basis. But always identify you as a New Yorker. So, I thought this would be an interesting conversation. So we've got some people. So that's good. So Tom's
What up,
here joining
Tom?
us.
I can always count on my man Tom.
Yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, like I mentioned, I'm stoked to have you on.
Thank
And
you.
I get to experience your genius on a regular basis during coffee. But I really wanted to share you with the audience. I thought it would be cool to talk about adaptability for the new year. But also in your communication style, right? So if you could tell everybody, in case anyone on the planet doesn't know you, who you are.
Yeah, I'm so very humbled to be here. Obviously Jen said, we talk a lot, so you kind of know me, and but thank you, John. I had to wear some kind of Yankee hat. You guys know that. So yeah, I'm a huge Yankee fan, but I still love John Soroka from Boston. Yeah. But yeah, I grew up in New York my whole life, came from Staten Island, and then moved around a little bit within the New York metropolitan area. But I've been selling I've been in sales for 27 years here in New York. And I live in Jersey. If anybody knows Phillipsburg, I live out in Phillipsburg near Pennsylvania, but used to travel to the city every day. New York, Long Island, Queens, Bronx. I was what they call windshield warrior. And then obviously since COVID, my whole world's changed, and I've had to adapt to doing business a whole different way, whether it's, via LinkedIn or Zoom or any of these other million platforms out there that are continuously popping up. But I was just mentioning to a friend of mine too, even the technology, I didn't even have a lot of this. I never used a lot of these technologies that we talk about in these groups and communities. Just about a year and a half ago, I didn't have anything but maybe, a CRM, Salesforce. So now I've got tech stack,
Yeah.
which wasn't even in my vocabulary a year and a half ago.
And that's certainly a sign of adaptability. There's that story about Blockbuster that at one point, what is the name of their CEO? Maybe it was Reed Hastings went to Blockbuster, right? And they said, hey, we have an idea to keep your internet sales going and to help you sort of adapt to the changing market. And they were like, no, we're good. We've got our customers. We're good. See how that worked out for them, right? And so that adaptability, and whether you're able to take a look at either yourself, whether what's happening, and say, okay, now it's time to pivot, or even to have an open mind about different technologies and new ways of doing things. So I think that's super important. You and I talk a lot about changing some of our communication style when we're talking to people, especially being a New Yorker, because we have a tendency, like I'm talking really fast right now, and I need to slow it down, right? That tendency to talk fast when other people may, in different parts of the country, talk a little slower.
Sure.
And at a little bit of a more measured pace. So tell me about that and what you do when you're calling different areas of the country.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, up until about last July in 2019, my main customer base, being that I was a field rep, was New York and New Jersey. So I was always just really dealing with New Yorkers or New Jerseyans, if you will. And it didn't, like maybe my style was working, because they can understand, having the ability to read somebody quickly and understand that they are either they need to be handheld, or they just need the basics. Give them the information and they'll make their decision, or whatever. And so I think, I was able to do that because a lot of people were probably also talking fast. But it brings me back to a story that I was working for Sherwin-Williams, the paint company, I don't know, about 10, 15 years ago. And I was looking to maybe move into management. And I took an interview with a district manager in Maine. And no offense to anybody on the call that's from Maine, but, I guess they're very, very different up there than they are in New York. And, it was a phone interview, which, by the way, he picked, the district manager picked up on speakerphone, which I hate right away, just having to talk to speakerphone, because I don't know who's listening and I don't know what's going on, and it's always scratchy or whatever. But I did the interview, and I really only had a couple of minutes, right? For a phone interview. It was very quick. And so I had maybe 5 minutes to really tell him my story. Other than what he may have already gleaned from my resume or my file at Sherwin-Williams, since it was an internal move. And when I didn't get the job, I got feedback from the HR person. And the first thing she said to me was, oh, he said it was a good interview. He enjoyed talking to you, but he felt like you wouldn't be able to assimilate into, or adapt, if you will, right, to their culture in Maine. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. I've lived my whole life in New York. That doesn't mean I can't adapt, because every single day on the phone or even face to face, I don't know what I'm going to hit. I'm going to meet and run into all kinds of different people. And you have to have the ability to, Sandler says, this mimicking, mirroring, right? You have to mirror and mimic what you're hearing on the other side of the line. If somebody is in a maybe a calm, cool, collected, you got to be calm, cool, collected. If they're all excited, maybe you got to be excited, or the opposite, just to bring them back down because they're disorganized or whatever. But I feel like I have to adapt every single day. From a person to person perspective, I don't know what I'm going to run into, even when I was just calling in New York. And now that I've been calling for the last year and a half across the country, it's definitely different. It is like every single call, depending on where I'm calling, I have to make an adjustment, whether it is in the way I'm speaking, the words I'm using, how quickly I'm speaking. I belong to a community called the Salesborgs, and we talk extensively about tone and the way you talk to people, and how you have different intonations in your voice help you adapt to what you might be hearing on the other side of the line, or, the nature of the conversation. So it's been a lot better for me, actually. I feel like, no offense to New Yorkers, I'm a New Yorker, but sometimes I hate talking to them, because they're God knows how many times I've gotten hung up on, cursed out and hung up on. And, when I call into Alabama, they're all kind of friendly down there, and I'll find myself really kind of talking like they talk, just, hey, listen, I love it down there. That Southern hospitality, heck, man, I love it. And so, I might even open the call with that, oh, I love your accent. I'm from New York. And they're like, yeah, I couldn't tell.
Yeah, no, I know. And, it's funny. I get on the phone or even on a Zoom with a New Yorker. It's easy to tell really quickly, and I can talk at whatever speed I'd like. Right. Yeah. And as soon as I get on the phone, on the Zoom or wherever with somebody else, I'm like, okay, so where are they at? Especially someone new.
Yeah.
So I look to see, how they greet me, to see how the speed in which they talk, to sort of start mirroring what they're doing, so that I can, relate to them, right? And slow down while still trying to be authentic and me, right? And so sometimes it's not necessarily the easiest thing to do.
Yeah.
I do have a special guest to join us today. Someone else from our coffee crew.
Oh, no.
Who wanted to come and say hi. who is someone who also adapts. So we've got
Ah.
Jonathan is here.
Hey, everybody.
My Boston rivalry.
Mac, what the hell are you talking about, buddy, huh?
I love you, John. You know that. I already said it.
It's funny. We were talking about.
I know. A lot of love.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Talking about what?
Oh, we were talking about Clubhouse this morning, how having more people in the conversation sort of made it fun. And I was inspired. And I said, you know what? Let's get someone else to just like surprise Mark. That would be fun. So thank you, Jonathan.
You're welcome. Good to see you guys.
It's good to see you. So what do you think about adaptability and what Mark is talking about with tonality? Did you have any thoughts?
Yeah. I guess growing up in Mass, I started learning about other regions in my first role. So I've got 20 years now, Jesus, of kind of calling into different regions and learning about it. And I think there is something to adapting and understanding where other people are come from. But there's also something to being kind of genuine for who you are and where you're from that I think is appreciated too. Like if you were to completely flip and go full Southern, which I know Mark doesn't do, and try to mimic people in other regions of the country, that's not going to play well. So, the learning process in my career has been, where to adapt to be most effective, but how to stay genuine, and keep that sensibility about myself too. So, and you're also constantly learning and growing. So, there's a lot that goes into that mix. I don't think it's a red, blue, Yankees, Red Sox, right, left type thing. It's something where there's a lot of nuance involved.
Yeah,
no, that's a really excellent add there and a good point. You don't necessarily, when you're mirroring, I'm talking about speed, and just being able to have an engaging conversation. I'm not talking about necessarily talking with a Southern accent.
No.
I'm sure that's not what Mark meant, right?
No, I just like when they open the call, it just sounds better. I don't know. Like some people say to me like, oh yeah, I love that New York accent. And sometimes I'm like, really? I'm like, I have a New York accent and like, I don't realize it. I don't hear it. No, we don't hear it. You don't hear your Boston accent. You don't hear it. And so it's like, no, I don't do that. Like, I don't all of a sudden take the whole conversation and I'm talking like with their accent. Obviously you can't do that, right?
Yeah.
But no, it's just about, their tone, their excitement level, their, and I'm usually very calm. I mean, I think that's the thing about when I talk about tonality, it's about equal business, especially if it's a sales call. It's about equal business stature. It's about not getting riled. It's not, somebody's going to say something like, I'm not interested, or why are you calling me? You can't get rattled, you just have to be calm and you say, oh, okay, I guess it's, I caught you at a bad time. And that's what the kind of tonalities I'm talking about, being kind of not monotone, but having an even tone through it, and it could change throughout the conversation. I mean, look, you can actually gain an advantage sometimes by just whispering at somebody, by lowering your tone. You could change the whole way the whole conversation is going by speaking quieter, adapting to the situation as opposed to, maybe that person. There's mirroring, but then there's situational intonations, where there's a big difference between me saying to you, this is going to work out for you, or this is going to work out for you. Like sometimes one might sound very canned and the other one sounds genuine. I'm genuinely interested in what you're having to say. Not, hey, I'm genuinely interested in what you have to say. That's not going to work,
Yeah, there's definitely, that's an excellent point. Lydia had an interesting comment. The Southerners are like Japanese, that they will politely yes you to death without ever making a real commitment to buy. That's a big reason why I moved to and embraced becoming a New Yorker. And I have to admit, I like the directness of being from New York. And when I speak to other New Yorkers, that there's this, it's either yes or no. There's no, They don't necessarily give you a whole lot of gray area or run around. They'll just tell you the truth. Not saying that other parts of the country don't, just saying that there's more of a willingness to be upfront. What do you guys think about that?
There's definitely, there's a lot more fluidity in the States now, where people originally come from, where they're living, but the regions still have their flavors to it. I've lived in Boston, LA, and New York, 3 totally different cities. And each have local tendencies to them, and that can come into play in sales calls because in the Northeast, you're probably less likely to have a lot of introductory get to know you parts of the conversation early until they get to know you, and then as you go through the sales process, you can build that up. My first calls into the Midwest, from north to south, totally different from Minneapolis to Dallas. But you can have more of a conversation, and it's expected. Like, they don't want you to jump in and start selling them in the first. Do you have 28 seconds that I can talk to you to sell something? I bet that works a lot less, in that region of the country. But that's also only part of it too, because you don't know the individual, where they come from, what their perceptions are of where they're at today. So a lot that you can learn from LinkedIn and other research before you start talking to somebody. But as Mark was saying, I think the other best thing you could do on tonality is active listening. The more that you can get to a point in the conversation where you can flip it from having to talk, if it's a first call 100% of the time, to get to a point that they're like, okay, I want to talk to you. And when you're in conversation, through a sales cycle, getting it more to 50-50 as much as possible, so that, you're doing more of the listening and you're taking off of them. And then, responding back either with questions that are building or points that are directly addressing them. I think that is one of the best ways to help with tonality. There's lots that you can figure out about regionalities and personalities, but, being genuine and valuable is probably going to be the best way to get to it.
Yeah, I mean, I built pretty much my whole career. Like, I remember when you talk about listening, active listening. I remember, and I don't know if she's on here listening. If not, I'll send this to her. But one of my mentors, leaders, when I was a really young sales manager back in 96, 7, 8, 9, Y2K era in IT solutions, she used to make me write my goals and stuff and actually tape it to my desk so I'd see it every day, and other little tidbits to get me to listen better. And as you can imagine, maybe I talked too much when I was younger, but she used to have this. I used to have this sticker on my desk, and I actually had it on my desk for like many years, even beyond that. And it said "short and sweet," and I just had to keep getting that into me. And what it really is today, it's like, certain. I think the old school way that everyone is taught in sales is you go into the conversation maybe and you ask them a question, and then as soon as they kind of give you an answer, you kind of let me give you my pitch, and it's just like, you're not really kind of peeling the onion in any way. You're not really getting into the nitty gritty to see if whether or not it warrants a further conversation, right? Everyone's just apt to pitch. And I think when prospects hear that, you sound the same as like 75,000 other people that have called them. And so what you really want to do, and this is where, again, like tonality comes into it, is ask questions, get the other person to talk, get that prospect to, shine the light on the prospect, and adapt. When we talk about adaptability, adapt to whatever they're telling you, and figure out what your next question is. And don't always think that, as soon as you hear something that might fit into your, features and benefits, you jump on it. And that's not really the way to build rapport, because nobody likes to be sold. They want to make the decision on their own, and I think that, when you really listen to understand, and you listen with intent to, understand really where their issues are, or whether or not you guys are a good fit or the product's a good fit, that's where you really start to see things turn around for you. And that's where it started to turn around for me, when I really just sort of stop talking.
Yeah. And that part about like the note to keep it short and sweet, that really resonates with me. I actually, for like the first decade of my, B2B sales career, I literally had a Post-it note that said, shut up, shut up. Just so that I would remember to pause and that it's not about me. Just
Yeah. I gave a piece of advice to an old CEO of mine one time. And this is something I used to do when it just to help me learn how to be a little bit more quiet and listen and really listen, understand, is I always carried a bottle of water. So when I was face to face and I was having a conversation, I'd be like, excuse me, and I take that sip of water. And what I found, interestingly enough, almost every single time I did that, they started talking. And they started giving me either more information or selling themselves on the idea that I just talked about, or telling me something more that's important that I it's just like when you stop and you really listen, and I had to use the water to force myself to do that face to face sometimes. And it worked like almost every single time. Somebody kind of like, dropped something more real on me after that. So
yeah, no, I hear that. So we have a question here from Lydia. Can someone comment on the San Francisco Bay Area? And we did also get some feedback from John Blake on that area. And you can share your thoughts. But John says, I believe it's about finding the need, engaging on that. San Francisco folks are not as direct as New York, but they do get down to business quickly. So has your experience been like that? Have you done some selling into that area?
Yeah. Go ahead, John. Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's nice when a Massachusetts person can win over a New York person. John John's the expert for living and selling in the area directly, but I think he's right. They do want to get down to business, but there is still that left coast California flavor, and it's kind of halfway between LA and Seattle. So you're, not that they're necessarily connected, but that whole coast has a different vibe to it. So you can't, I wouldn't jump in and kill them with a New York, like, let's get down to business right away kind of thing. Like you have to do some pleasantries first. But you also, it's a highly transient region that's changed dramatically over the last 10 to 20 years. So it really depends on what industry you're selling into. Like if you're doing anything tech, chances are, they've been there for less than 10 years. They're making decent money and they're doing, 12-hour a day startup stuff and want to, keep the ball rolling. If you're selling something more traditional, manufacturing or, legal or something else, like, who knows how they're going to react. So it's going to be a mixed bag in the Bay Area.
Yeah, no, I agree with that too. We have another question here. Maybe Mark can take this one because I know this is an area that you typically call often. What's your experience with Southeastern territories, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina? People here just got a new territory.
Well, I mean, for starters, I think most of Florida is pretty much New York 20 years ago.
Yeah, sure.
I was always, I grew up, yeah, right. I grew up learning that, in a Jewish family, from Brooklyn to Staten Island to Jersey to Florida, that's just what we did. And so I look at Florida. In fact, a lot of my Jewish friends are in Florida. But I wouldn't say everybody is from New York and Florida, Georgia, North Carolina. I think what goes on down there, at least what I'm experiencing is, and you got all walks of life everywhere, but I think they like to evaluate things maybe a little bit longer. They want to know, they want like they just want to have proof. I mean, maybe this is just everybody, but it's a little slower. They want to do business. They're genuinely interested. I think, again, I think anywhere you call into any part of the country, it's just your approach. I think, it's not about you. It's not about your process. You have to understand, like what I've been doing lately, because over the last year, I had never called into all these areas, is really just asking them, hey, how can we do business together? How do you like to do business? How do you like to communicate? Like people assume, oh, I didn't get them on the phone. I didn't get them on the phone. I didn't get them on the phone. Well, maybe they just don't like to be on the phone. So find the other platform. Maybe it's Facebook. Maybe it's LinkedIn. So like we said earlier in the conversation, you got to meet people where they are. So, in those southern states, maybe those places have other avenues that they find their information in. But I found like in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, I've got a really great client in Georgia called Peachtree Hotel Management. And I don't know if the guy there was from New York or not, but he was just like, all right, just tell me what it's going to cost, and show me, what are all the, give me the spec sheet, give me this, show me the facts. And then he reviewed it for, I kept following up, and I said, I set next steps. And it just took him a little bit longer than I think, some of the people, I've had one call closes with New Yorkers. And I don't think I've ever had a one call close anywhere else in the country. But yeah, I would say that about the southern part of the states. Like I said, I love calling into Alabama a lot because, I had family there. So I have relative stories to tell. And again, I think sales, of course, is also about telling stories, when to tell those stories. I tell personal stories. I love calling into Colorado because my grandfather basically built Estes Park with his construction company back in the 20s and 30s. And so, I tell that story. I tell the story, if I call somebody in San Francisco, my niece lives in Daly City. My brother lived in Redondo Beach in San Jose for 10 years, so like I always draw things from other parts of the country. Like that's how I kind of help. I don't necessarily, like we said earlier, I don't talk like they do, but I'll relate stories that might be relative to their market or their territory or their state. So Alabama is great. Florida, I always tell the story. I'm from a Jewish family, so I was always born to move to Florida. I'm just trying to figure out how can I get to Florida before I'm dead.
Wow. I think you made some really excellent points there. I specifically loved the part where you talked about, find out how they want to communicate. I think especially right now, I'm finding more often than not, that someone won't want to do a Zoom, that they don't want to do like a Google Meet or anything, that they'd rather talk to me on the phone. And that's how they prefer to communicate because they don't want to see themselves and do the whole self-conscious thing because that's them, right? And actually asking the question of how do you most want to communicate, whether that's email, whether that's, whatever it is they want, because it's not about you, I think right now is super important, especially as Zoom fatigue is coming on and, people are experiencing that. Maybe not right now since we just had the break, but, as people have been home longer, being conscious of how other people want to buy, how they want to communicate.
Yeah. Like I was helping a sales rep the other day with an email breakdown, and his email sequences, and somebody I'm mentoring, and one of the things he wrote in his like call to action, he wrote, I think, however the cadence of the message went, and then all of a sudden he went Zoom with a question mark, and I thought to myself, okay, while I understand what that means, and it's kind of flippant to me just to say, hey, Zoom, if understanding who you're actually talking to, or without actually understanding who you're really talking to and where they like to communicate, I tweaked that sentence for him. And I said, why don't you just write, open to talking about this, or open to a call? Because a call could be a Zoom call or a phone call or a Google call or whatever it is. So I just sort of tweaked that for him. And I said, hey, you're not sure who they really, you're not sure how they want to communicate. So I felt like the way it was written, like Zoom with a question mark, just seemed very, I don't know, it's a risk. It's a risk that they don't want to Zoom. So you now have that little moment of, oh, well, I don't want to Zoom. Why don't you just send me information? Or why don't you just call? Now, if they said, oh, why don't you just call me? That's great. I'll say, oh, yeah, okay, no problem. But before that ever happens, let's change that a little bit. Let's just say, would you be open to talking about this some more? Or would you be open to learning more? There's a whole slew of those phrases, but I felt like just Zoom, even because it's so new. It's like, how do you know you're not going to be on the phone with still a baby boomer decision maker who doesn't Zoom?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And just like we were talking about at the very beginning of this, session, like you didn't know about all the things in your tech stack, right?
Yeah.
Early on. And so, making that assumption and then making yourself have an upward climb to say, yeah, I do want to do a face-to-face video call with you, right? You're then giving yourself sort of that ramp instead of just asking for intent, right? Like, are you interested? And or actually, there's data around this from Gong that said just finding out whether they're at all interested is really a good call to action. Is there any interest? And just keeping it super simple like that, just to see if you can keep that conversation going. And then maybe learning how they best like to communicate, right?
Well, that's just what that's exactly what we're talking about in terms of adaptability. I mean, I've had to, it's like there's adaptability to your situation. Oh, all of a sudden I got to move. So I got to adapt to a new environment, or I got to go to a different school. So I got to adapt to that. But there is that adaptation that could happen moment to moment on a phone call or an email sequence or that, and so I feel like almost, yeah, I mean, I think it's just like you have to have that open mindset. Look, like you said, Jen, a year and a half ago, I didn't even know what a tech stack was. I mean, I knew what a tech applications are, but I never called it tech stack. In fact, when I was following Jake Dunlap almost 2 years ago, one of the things and it's funny because I'm not even in tech sales, and I'm just trying to understand, like, he used to talk about all these problems with, the handoff from the SDR to the AE and whatever. And, all these things fascinated me because I've always been a full life cycle rep. So I never had the opportunity to take advantage of any technology because I was always in the field, like I'd sit home on Monday, make calls and emails and write quotes and, do that kind of stuff. And then Tuesday through Friday, I was, going from hospital to hospital, school to school, whatever it was. And I didn't really have time for tech because by the time I got home, I was exhausted. I eat, have dinner with my family, and I go to sleep. Or I read a book or something like that at night or watch TV. But, the adapting to all this tech around us is only a good thing. I mean, look, I've adapted it because it's literally helped my business. I mean, I run Yesware. I'm running small little campaigns on Yesware to A/B test different strategies as far as email. I'm running Seamless to get the data. And what was really interesting, what I love about this whole community and folks, LinkedIn and these different things, is that it gives an opportunity for somebody like me or us, if you will, because I think we're all relatively the same age group, to have access to these young people, like, to have access to hear somebody who's 22, 23, 26 years old, tell me what they're going through. And you know what? Look, I think when we were young at that age, we didn't have this, so we made the mistakes. So I have a mentee also. I just recently kind of picked up. I don't know if he's listening, Dustin, but and not that we have a formal relationship or anything, but I've been talking with him. He's not even on LinkedIn yet. He just got on LinkedIn like yesterday.
Yeah.
And to me, that's like wild. But the idea that he like doesn't know what to ask or doesn't know these things is actually a strength. I told him, I'm like, that's a strength. Lean into that. Your vulnerability, your intent to learn is so important. And, I'm learning all the time. Like I said, I learned things in the last 9 months I couldn't even have dreamed to learn, in the last 20 years. So.
Yeah, no, and that's amazing. And that's all signs of adaptability, right? So we are out of time. We're actually over, believe it or not. But this has been a great conversation. And so I think we've showed pretty clearly your adaptability, because I just kind of sprung Jonathan on you. You just rolled with it. So thank you
Yeah.
for that, right? From windshield warrior to guy on LinkedIn Live talking about adaptability and how to communicate to adapt is pretty amazing. So next week, thank you for joining me, and thank you for Jonathan for joining me as well.
Yeah,
And getting yourself, because it was very short notice. I'm like, Jonathan, I just had an idea. Come, here's the link.
I had to adapt and take down the COVID holiday beard. So we're
right?
Yep.
So everyone here adapted today. So that's
this is my COVID haircut.
So next week, for anyone who's interested in joining, I've got Pradeep Sadir, who is the founder of SaaS Sales IO, which is a digital magazine website. It's really about bias-free content and no fluff. And I think it's pretty amazing. So I'm excited to have him join me. And then I've got another ladies' happy hour coming on January 27th at 7 p.m. And wait until you see the lineup. I've got a whole new lineup of ladies joining me. Nice. So it's going to be an exciting conversation. And I hope everyone joins me. And see you soon. See you next week. Thanks.
Thank you.